Sound like a radio name. I like it. Gordon Gray.
Yeah.
He's the executive director of the Pinpoint Policy Institute. I want to talk a little inflation. So, Gordon, get into the weeds here. I mean, you've got what's called the personal consumption expenditures. And I'm not saying this is a put down to the listening audience. The technical term, of course, is the change in goods serviced by consumed by all households serving, non-profit institutions. Again, that's called the PCE, the CPI, which is how many of us, as a former economics reporter here, we kind of look at the average overall when it comes to inflation. That is the change of out-of-pocket expenditures. Okay, explain this to the audience. Which one should we be looking at? Because last week, for the month of May, it was a 2.7. It's kind of hasn't gone up. It's just kind of flatlined. The CPI numbers last month went down, again, month to month, but it's still 3.4 compared to last year. Yep. The PCE, Consumer Price Index, which one should we be concerned about when it comes to the high cost of goods for consumers?
So I think for most people, I think it's worth just being mindful of both of them. And I think at the end of the day, what matters to us is how much does it cost us to go about our daily lives. And so for us, reality smacks us in the face every time we go to the grocery store. We're experiencing that as consumers, and those data sets reflect that experience for all of us. Now, the PCE is the preferred measure for the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
It is somewhat more of a comprehensive measure. So going forward and looking at the direction of monetary policy that, again, affects us all, the PCE is the one that the Federal Reserve is looking at.
Here was, I think this was on CNBC, Bleakley financial analyst Peter Bookvar says that, for 2024, maybe even going to 2025, he says inflation's just going to stay between 3 to 4%. This is what he said.
I think the real question with inflation is after this moderation, because that's what happens. You get an inflation spike and you get the come down. And where does inflation, though, eventually settle out at? On the inflation side, it's very important. Just because you have a two-handle on a particular month doesn't mean that the inflation battle has been won. It's where does inflation on a multi-year basis eventually stop at? And I don't think it's going to be 1 to 2. I think it's going to settle out at 3 to 4, even though we're still going to get some 2% prints.
Interesting.
U.S. will stop.
So let me stop right there. So, Gordon, is that the conventional wisdom? I mean, you cover a lot of this. Is that the conventional wisdom throughout the remainder of the year, even going to 2025? Because now we're going to enter the second half of the year. It's going to stay between 3 to 4. I mean, you get some people. I mean, economists that we interview all the time. Some believe that you may see it moderate a little bit. Some think it may even go higher.
Yeah, that might be. For PCE, that's probably on the little bit of the high side. But
right.
It's probably pretty close to the mark on CPI, which, as you noted, was, has been coming in a little higher, in part just because of the way those data are composed. But he's absolutely right that every time we see a monthly change with a two handle, understand, annualized, that can still round up to looking at, a little over 3%. So you'd be in that range. And that's kind of where we are right now, even though the Fed's been leaning awfully hard against that for some time now.
Gordon, do you get certain type of economists we have, like I said, all the time in this radio show. They think actually, and I understand if you're in Florida, which we are based out of, you got hurricanes and storms. So yes, cost of insurance is going to go up. I'm sorry, I'm not a Biden guy, but I don't blame that on Biden. That's just because of the marketplace dealing with that. But in some areas, if you include the cost of your mortgage going up and things, they think inflation is way higher than the 3.5, 3.4% we see today.
Absolutely, and you get tremendous variation across regions. Some areas that have seen a lot of population growth have seen housing costs go through the roof, and the way the CPI, we were talking about some of these differences. CPI weights housing more higher than PCE does, so that's part of why that's been coming in hotter. But that is definitely part of some of the variation that people will see depending on where they are. And a lot of that comes down to housing. A lot of that comes down to that equilibrium between supply and demand. In a lot of housing markets, it's totally out of whack. You can't build housing, and depending on where you are, you've gotten a tremendous influx of people, particularly in the Sun Belt. And so a lot of that's being reflected through these data across different areas and markets.
Gordon, when you look at the analysis and you talk to others out there, is the attitude on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, again, it's going to come out next week for the month of May. Do they believe it's going to kind of just remain moderate, 3 to 3.4? Are they expecting some of that number? Because every time we think the number could go down, we see, it went back up by 0.5%. It wasn't supposed to go that route. What's the conventional wisdom when you talk to those as the market analyst?
Yeah, no, I think that conventional wisdom that it's going to be hovering in that 3% range right now. That's about that middle ground. And again, there's three different ways to look at these data. Essentially, have we improved from the recent highs? And that's somewhat relevant to those of us. We go to the store and the prices haven't skyrocketed like they had in the recent past. The second piece is, how does the data come in relative to expectations? And that's where a lot of financial markets and policymakers look at. And then last of all, and the one that matters most to us is, are the things that we're buying, are they harder to purchase? And the reality is, over the last year, and frankly over the course of the Biden presidency, real earnings, so adjusted for inflation, what American workers take home has gone down.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think that's what matters most for a lot of people.
It's all baked in. We're never, we've had restaurant owners, we played this stuff on our radio show that, for some things, yes, compared to what it was maybe in 2022, they have come down, but there's no way they're ever going to go back to pre-COVID levels. So
no,
this is what happens when you shut down an economy. All right. Anyway, still paying for the effects. Just curious how much longer we're going to end up paying for it. Gordon Gray is with the executive director of the Pinpoint Policy Institute. So, well, there you go. In fact, I think we have an article out today and tomorrow on the FloridaDaily.com on what this summer outlook may be with the economy. So, Gordon, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
You got it, brother. So,